Hello everybody and welcome back to the Cupcake Jemma channel with me, Sally. Now before we get started, you may have noticed that we are in a brand new location this week. And that is because in the midst of all this madness, Sam has managed to move house from one beautiful kitchen to the next. So we are here because we opened our shop on Monday this week and it is manic over there. So they've kicked us out there. They've kicked us out at the Wandsworth Bakery because they're really busy. So luckily, Sam has this lovely kitchen where we can work today. So today's recipe is a real essential. It's really easy. It's gonna sound scary, but it's not. I'm gonna take you step by step all the way through this rough puff pastry recipe so that you get flaky, buttery, delicious pastry that's not quite a classic puff pastry because that's kind of scary, it's kind of hard, it takes a lot of practice, a lot of stuff can go wrong, your butter can just ooze out and it's very sad and you'll end up crying. So a rough puff is an easy, simple, quick substitute that's going to give you those buttery, flaky layers. They might just not be quite as neat as a puff pastry. So if you wanted to make croissants with this, they might just come out a little bit rougher, but who cares? That's what this is all about. So the first thing that we need to do, well, this is all about making pastry. We need to make some pastry. So we've got 325 grams of plain flour here. And we're gonna do this in a really big bowl. So get your largest bowl out and pop in your flour. And into that, we're gonna add some salt. So you want a teaspoon of salt. Make sure it's fine salt. If you've only got the coarse stuff, then maybe pop it in a pestle and mortar and just grind it up so it's nice and fine. So that's gonna go in here. I didn't talk about these. How cute are these? We've added some pink and some gorgeous turquoise cups and teaspoon measures to the Cupcake Jemma website. I'll put a link in the description box below. They're so cute. I literally can't get enough of them. So if you want some, go and get yourself some. Right, anyway, into this, we need to add some butter. Now, the most important thing throughout this whole recipe is that this butter stays cold. You do not want to warm it up because it will melt and it will ruin your puff pastry. So I have just taken this out of the fridge. It is chopped up into little cubes like this. There we go, and we're gonna chuck it straight into the bowl. So what we want to do is touch this as little as possible so that our hands don't melt the butter. If you've got really hot hands, then maybe you want to run them under some cold water before you begin. If you feel like they're heating up, the butter's heating up a little bit, pause, get it in the fridge, leave it for half an hour and then come back to it. Anyway, let's get started. So first of all, we're gonna get our hands in, okay? This is gonna be a little bit messy, but it's kind of fun. I love doing this. So I'm gonna put my hands in. I'm gonna start by just tossing the butter through the flour. Now, once all of the butter is coated in the flour, it is time to squish these blobs of butter. So we're gonna pick them up with our fingers and our thumbs, and we're just gonna squish them through like this. So they've kind of flattened a little bit. So first off, we're just gonna do that with all the bits of butter. And as you're going, keep on tossing it in the flour. Now, once you have squished all of your blobs of butter, we're just going to keep doing the same thing just to make them a little bit smaller. So I'm going to take a bit of butter here that's already been squished and I'm just going to sort of break it in half and make it into these kind of, I don't know how big that is, maybe a centimetre or so squared, big flat bits of butter, and that's as far as we're going to take them. So don't worry when you're doing this about trying to make them all perfectly even size or anything. That is not what this is about. This is rough puff, remember? So we just want to end up with loads and loads of squished bits of butter. So once your mixture is looking like this, so loads of irregular bits of butter in there and still loads and loads of just kind of dry flour, it is time to add some water to bind this all together. And I know this probably looks very different to any kind of pastry that you've made before, but trust me, I think you guys trust me by now and I need you to on this one. So what we need now is ice cold water. So I've put some water in this little bowl and then I chucked it in the fridge just again because we want to keep this really cold as we go. Now we're going to start off with 75 mils of the water or 5 tablespoons, and I'm going to put that directly into the middle of my bowl. Now the chances are we're going to need some more of that water, but it's best to add it a little bit at a time. So now we're going to go back in with our hands and we're going to kind of bring this together, but we're not going to knead it or work it too much. So you can definitely see this is still very, very dry, and what we want to end up with is a almost sticky mixture, and it's going to be stuck to my fingers, but we don't want any of this really, really dry flour that we've got in here. We want to kind of rehydrate all of it. So I'm going to go tablespoon at a time, just adding more water and just mixing it around with my hand until we get to that sticky dough. So now that it is sufficiently sticking to my hands, I know it is ready. There's not too many kind of small dry bits in there. So what we're going to do now is tip this out onto the surface and just bind it all together. So I know it might just look like a bit of a crumbly mess right now, but that's okay. It is a crumbly mess, but it's all right, it's all right. So you can see all those big old lumps of butter in there. That is what's gonna give us that rough puff, those flaky buttery layers. So we're kind of done with this stage, and it needs to go into the fridge now. Now I like to work with smaller bits of pastry, particularly if you're making a pie with like a base and a lid. I would separate the pastry now so that you're only working on one bit at a time and you can keep the other one in the fridge. So I'm just going to split this into by eye. You could do it by weight if you wanted to. And I'm just going to sort of form it into a bit of a disc, and then I'm going to wrap it in cling film, and then we're going to keep it in the fridge for at least half an hour before we get to the next stage, because we need it to cool down because we've been handling it a lot. I'm going to go and wash my hands before I do that though, because look at them. All right, so these have been in for, to be honest, it's been more like an hour. With this first kind of chill, I do prefer to leave it in a bit longer. You could do this like over kind of a couple of days as well. It doesn't have to be sort of a one-day jobby. So we want these to be really, really firm. You can see here to start with. So now it is time to roll and fold. And it is exactly that. We're going to start with a dusting of flour on the surface, not too much. You don't want to get too much flour kind of incorporated in the pastry. And then I've got my rolling pin too. I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on that. If you've got a non-stick rolling pin, then yeehaw, lucky you. So grab your first bit of pastry, and we're just going to roll it out a little bit first. It might feel like it's kind of cracking and looking a little bit rubbish, but I can't say it enough. Trust me, guys. Right, here we go. Right, I like to move this around as well. So I kind of go backwards and forwards a little bit and then move it, kind of scooping up some of that flour to make sure it's not sticking to the surface. And you can see, look at these amazing bits of butter in here. And this is what I mean, like cracking around the edges. That is absolutely fine. You can, if it's looking a little bit too AWOL, you can sort of push it all in a bit, but you don't need to do that. So we'll just roll it out until it's about maybe a centimetre or so thick. And then we're going to fold. So we're going to do two folds. We're going to take one side and pull it all the way across. And then the other side, and take it over the top like that. And you can already see that this is looking a little bit smoother than it was to begin with. Let's compare. Et voila, see, it is finally looking a little bit more like pastry. So that one is done. So we're going to rewrap this, and we're going to do the same with our second piece as well. Now before you do wrap this in cling film, if you've got quite a lot of extra flour on there, just brush it off. There we go. And this is going to go back in the fridge for another half an hour. And we're going to do this 3 more times, all right? So I probably won't talk to you each time. Sam will play some lovely music over the top of it. See you after all of that. And there we have it. That is your rough puff pastry recipe ready to go for your delicious pies that you're gonna make. I'm gonna show you something really simple that you can do with this. Maybe you can do this with your offcuts, your wastage, but also if you're practicing rough puff pastry, this is a great way to sort of see if it's worked or not and be left with a delicious treat. Whether it has worked or not, it's still gonna be yummy. So we're gonna do some twists. Right, so you wanna get your first piece of pastry. I've left my second piece in there because we only wanna work with one at a time so that we're not kind of letting them heat up too much. So we're gonna dust our surface again and we're gonna roll this one out until it's about 5 millimeters thick. So before we put this back into the fridge and work on our second piece of pastry, I'm actually just going to cut off some of these raggedy edges, but don't throw these away because this is a fab way of testing your oven temperature. You can pop a little bit of this in and see what happens. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while, but for now I'm just going to neaten this up. There we go. And I'm going to put this piece of pastry onto a lightly floured baking tray. And I'm going to go pop this in the fridge and grab back the other bit of pastry. So again, we're going to roll this out to the same thickness. So again, I've just trimmed that down, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half, either way, because it's pretty square right now, down the middle, and now it is time for our fillings. So if you have some fancy jam, maybe your neighbours gifted you some homemade blackberry jam, delicious. But I don't have that. I've got Nutella, which I kind of think is better than jam. And I'm going to dollop this on and spread it out, just making sure I don't go all the way to the edges because we need to glue it to the second piece of pastry. And now for my second piece, I'm going to go Biscoff spread. Because I love Biscoff spread, and Biscoff in these pastry twists is the most delicious thing. Biscoff's a little bit firmer, but I'd recommend not really heating it up much because you don't want any heat on your pastry. Remember, we still want to keep this really, really cold. If you put hot fillings on this pastry, it's just going to melt the butter and it's going to ruin our amazing buttery puff pastry. And now I'm just going to grab back sheet number 2 and I'm going to chop this one in half as well. Let's kind of work out which way we're going to chop it. That way down the middle. And before we put it on top here, we're just going to grab our egg wash here. So I've just gone for 1 egg, no milk this time, and whisked it all up so it's one smooth liquid. And I'm going to put a very little bit on the top and bottom of these bits of pastry. And this is just going to act as some glue so that when we pop our other bit on top, they will stick together. You can also make these as savory twists as well. Maybe you put some pesto in there, or you could do some cheese, like grated cheese, bit of paprika. They are amazing, trust me. I have made a million of them. So next it is time to twist. Now we're gonna make some little slices first, and the thinner the slices, the better the twist. So keep them thin. So about, be good if I told you, right? 1.5 centimeters, would you say? And then what we do is we pick it up and then we twist them in the opposite direction. Et voila. And I'm going to pop that on my baking tray. Now they're not quite ready, but we'll get them all to this stage first. So let's just keep chopping and twisting. How cool do these look? They look super fancy, but they're super easy. So they're almost oven ready, but before they go in, we're gonna give a very light egg wash. Try not to get too much on the baking tray, and then a sprinkling of Demerara, and they're ready. So this is just going to give our twists a golden, crispy, crunchy, sweet topping, and now they are ready to bake. So you want to preheat your oven. It's really important always, but especially for this, because these want to go into a really hot oven, because that is what's going to make these puff. Cold pastry, hot oven, puffy, Maluffy amazingness. So grab your oven thermometer, get this in your oven whilst it's preheating until it is at 200 degrees C, which is really, really hot. You can grab these off of CupcakeJemma.com. Again, description box, go check it out. But also, if you want to make sure that these are going to come out perfectly, remember how I said to save your little off-cut bits? What you can do is whack your twists into the fridge so that they stay cold, and in the meantime, you can bake off a few of these little off-cuts, maybe give them an egg wash as well, and then you can test your oven temperature and the time it takes. It's a really great top tip, and also they're really yummy to eat. So my oven is ready. It's at 200 degrees C. So these are going to go in for around 15 minutes. Check them, because what you really want is a lovely golden crispy topping. If they look a little bit underbaked, just leave them in for a few more minutes. So I can't wait for you to see them. You can't eat them. I'm going to eat them, but you can watch me eating them. Right, anyway, shut up. Let's go. Do you want a snack? How amazing do these look? Like, just look at the ends of them. Look how puffy it has gone. My favorite thing to do when these are baking is to sit by the oven and watch them, because you can see them puffing and moving and they're so happy, and it's the best thing ever. But well, do you know what? It's not. The best thing ever is eating them. So let's have a go. But I want to cut this because I want you to see and hear the crunch. Those layers here, it's just falling apart in my hands. This is amazing. This is so great, and it's so easy. It's so delicious. Hang on, I can't pick it all up. So good, right? So buttery, because I'll tell you what, I know that the easy thing to do is to go to the superstore and buy some ready-made puff pastry, but you'll probably find that most of them don't even have any butter in them, unless you buy the all butter one. They're made with like vegetable shortening. This is super easy to make, right? And it is full of delicious, delicious butter. So you get that proper pastry every single time. I've already got pastry around my mouth. Let me stop. Have a look inside. Okay, I'm ready. So thank you so much. Please have a go at this because I promise, like, I know that pastry is scary, but hopefully that looked easy because it is easy and you can just do anything with it. You can make pies, you can make savory twists, all sorts. So let me know how you get on over on Instagram and in the comments box below. We'll be back next week, hopefully with Dane, maybe even with Gemma. I know she really wants to come up and see us because the shop is open, guys. If you are in London this weekend, come and see us. We'll be open 11 till 7 on Saturday and 12 till 6 on Sunday. The guys are slinging out the cakes, making all the coffees. It's amazing to be back. We are loving it. So thanks to everyone that's already come and thanks to all you, because I know you are gonna come when you can. So we'll see you next week with another recipe.